Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spilling the Tea on GovCon. I'm Teresa Moon, Vice President of Communications and Marketing for Parabolis. We are the preeminent partnership for government contractors, providing holistic support that includes a line of credit to fund your growth. The purpose of this podcast is to assist small businesses with success in the federal marketplace by introducing them to industry experts and resources that they may not otherwise know about. Today, we welcome Drew DiSilvestro, CEO of AmeriTech Contracting, LLC. Drew is a dynamic business leader, and his journey is one we are proud to share with you today. So welcome to the show, Drew.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this. I've met with a few people on your team, and what I've heard about you from them says a lot because I work for people as well. And when your teammates can talk well about you, I always get excited to meet the man behind it. And so let's see if the myth holds up to it.
I hope so.
No pressure there, right?
No pressure.
Well, listen, in what I have learned about you, I got really excited. And it seems that you have built a career that spans not only through military service, but large scale operations. And that's led to some rapid growth within your company in the construction industry. And so I would love for you to talk to us a little bit about some of the defining moments that have shaped your leadership style with regard to your experience and background.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I would say, first and foremost, the opportunity that was presented to me years ago. I was running a company, AmeriTech, grade A home improvement, not AmeriTech Contracting. And I was still wearing the uniform. I was in the Guard. And I got called and said, hey, in about 8 months or so, you guys are going to be deploying out to the Middle East. To get to that actual training, to get to the deployment itself, we had to go to a training out in Germany. It was a 3-week time frame. And I had a team in place that I thought could actually execute and manage my company. I went off to Germany, did our training, came back, and I came back to a whole slew of headaches. And at the time, I didn't know exactly what the best thing was to do for the company itself. And so I decided that it was best to probably close the doors and just hyper focus on the deployment at hand in the next, 8 months or so. And what that taught me years down the road was I didn't build the organization off of systems and processes that could be replicated. I built it based off of me. So the company was successful when Drew DiSilvestro was sitting at the helm in button seat, but to step away for 3 weeks and then come back to all the headaches that I came back to really resonated and said, hey, if I ever do this again, I have to make sure that I can build it based off of systems only, not relying on just a person. And so that's what I ended up doing here at AmeriTech. So when I came into AmeriTech, the first thing that I did was I developed the workflow process of how we actually navigate day to day through just our file management system so that it could be replicated and essentially scalable. And that's what has led to the rapid growth and success, is that everything we do here can be scaled. So therefore, the people like to say we're building the plane as we're flying it. We can legitimately build that plane as we're flying it to the success that we have done in the last 4 years.
I love that because so many people are afraid of failure. And it wasn't a failure that you walked away from your company to serve your country. It was that, like you said, the company was built around you, and without you, everything imploded. And so you learned very quickly from just one mistake that wasn't scalable, and you brought it to practice to something, and you've seen the fruits of your labor then with that. Putting all of those processes and procedures into practice has allowed you to grow really rapidly in a very short period of time. And I love that it didn't deter you from continuing to go. A lot of people would have said, I think I might find something else to do, because they consider their businesses to be their baby.
Yeah.
And nobody's going to hand their baby over to someone else. And essentially, you don't have to do that when you have the proper processes in place. And
For sure.
I think a lot of business owners that's going to resonate with them, because they're either doing that right now and they're watching their business implode around them, or they didn't realize that something like that doesn't have to happen to you, that you can start doing this now. Because a lot of people, we've used that saying in our office, building the plane while we're in the air. And it's an unsteady place to be if you don't have the right tools around you to do it. And it's not usually going to be followed by success unless you have those processes in place. And so I commend you on learning so quickly and and under the circumstances that you did. I think it's interesting to note as well, when I was speaking to your team about you, of course, they're going to tell me things about you that you probably wouldn't have shared with me. So of course I'm going to bring it up.
Okay.
I'm sure they told you that. They told me that.
They did not.
You have
So
pretty,
you know.
you have a pretty interesting early chapter in your story too. I think a lot of people are like, they have this, common understanding of what they think a military person is going to, personality is going to bring to the table, and they don't recognize that you had a life outside of that as well, right? And something that wasn't just aligned to the military. You had a punk rock band, I heard.
I had a punk rock band. I loved punk rock when I was a kid.
I love that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's crazy. I think back on this, and I think back when I was 16 years old, my parents trusted me and my buddies enough to let us get in vans and buses and tour. And it was insane.
Wow.
It was crazy. Yeah. So we had a band. We were lucky enough to end up getting signed to some small, indie labels, right? And that afforded us opportunities to be able to tour, up and down the East Coast and throughout the country, Canada. And
Cool.
The part about me that I learned in at the age of 16 was that I loved the chase of finding the opportunities to land ourselves on a show in the vicinity of the next area of the country we would be in, right? And so the negotiation, and even we had small riders, nothing significant, right? We were a small punk rock band, but just saying, hey, could we get a pizza or some water or soda or whatever it was, so that way, and whatever potential cash we could drum up from the front door, right? So that we could make it to the next location without going into our own pockets, had enough gas money. Once in a while, we were lucky enough to sell enough merchandise at a venue to be able to, get into a Super 8 or some kind of a lower end hotel so we could all shower, right? But just that was a thrill. And it really taught me a lot about my being creative on the fly. And there'd be many times we'd be on the road and the show that we were supposed to go to would either cancel or it'd fall through. And so on the fly, and this was before like social media, and I think MySpace was around, but real social media, real abilities to go, you couldn't just go and DM somebody, right? So I had to go on there and be emailing on an old Verizon, I think it was a flip phone or one of those Sidekick phones, or whatever it was, trying to find, because I couldn't go find her numbers, trying to find us the next opportunity. And so I really found that exciting. I loved music. I started playing my instrument when I was 6 years old. But in particular, the thing I loved about that was the chase of landing the next opportunity. I was more excited about landing the opportunity than going to execute and playing the show. And playing shows was awesome and fun.
And I love that, because I have to imagine that there's a clear line between that experience and your growth through, good and bad through your business endeavors. And so I thought that was a really cool little bit of information. Normally when we're asking people questions like that, they don't tell us something that cool. And I love the fact that you were out on the road too. That part I didn't know about it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think that, it humanizes this a little bit more too, because when business owners who are, just emerging, or they're getting into the federal marketplace for the first time, they see themselves sometimes from an insecure perspective and smaller than, right? And they're going to be listening to, you started off the podcast by talking about some of the struggles that you've had, but we're going to lead into some of the success that you've had because of those struggles. And sometimes it's hard for people to link it together and see that, on the other side of struggle, if you keep going and you keep improving, that there is success on the other side of it. And so, I think this was a great buildup. So I appreciate you, even though that you didn't know that part of it. I'm glad that we were able to sneak that in here, because now I want to move in to talk about AmeriTech. You've had a tremendous amount of success there and have experienced rapid growth in a really competitive federal construction market, which most people know. The infrastructure bill provided a ton of money in many different facets, mostly going into construction. And so with that being said, and your emergence into that market, what do you believe has been the key driver behind the momentum that you've had so far?
Being relentless, really and truthfully. It's really easy to get caught up in the moments of being unsure, or how are we going to do this, or things never go right, right? And especially in construction. I don't care if it's federal construction. I don't care if it's private or public work. but construction in general, right? You do a small home project, you don't know what's behind the wall. You open it up and you're like, oh shoot, you know, we weren't expecting a buried outlet here or whatever it may be, right? And so the day in and day out of of just experiencing the unknowns of construction, right? Then I couple that with the day in and day out of the unknowns of just being an entrepreneur and figuring out how the heck we're going to make it happen. You have to have a strong mind, and but you have to be relentless. And then what I would say to anybody out there that's listening, the key is always waking up and just moving that next step forward, right? Showing up every day, whether you have 20% to give or you have 110% to give, just being able to show up and give is way more than what most people can say they're going to be able to do. And that will continue to propel you forward and be better and set up for success better than the next one.
I love that. And, you know, anyone that's been through the slightest bit of, you know, had issues in their lives or hit a bump in the road, the difference between those that go on to succeed and those that stay in it or don't succeed is that element there of relentlessness and perseverance. And so I love that. I can personally relate to it. I know that business owners that are listening to us today can relate to it as well. And, you know, within your organization itself, that, you know, approach as being relentless, what does it mean in practical terms inside your organization? And how do you balance the intensity of what relentlessness looks like with long-term sustainability, both for yourself and for your team? Because I know people tell me, and have for my entire life, you're a lot sometimes. And I imagine someone with perseverance and relentlessness in their blood like you have, you probably know that to be the case too. So how do you balance that within your organization, both with keeping people motivated on that track, but then also yourself too, the sustainability of it?
So I'll tell you, first off, my wife calls me exhausting. So, but it's good. You want to know why? Because she balances me out. So I would say in my personal life, I have a really strong partner at home, right? And I would not be where I am today without having somebody to be a strong sounding board and a strong support system. I actually just had this conversation last night with one of my employees, and I said, listen, my life changed when I had a solid person that I could turn to in any kind of situation and just know no matter what happens, I have that person and we're going to figure this out together. Right. And so that's the key to my balance personally. My wife is the exact opposite of who I am, very introverted. Her idea of fun is sitting at home, snuggling, watching, you know, a Netflix show or watching TV together. Right. Or Drew's idea of fun is something competitive, probably high octane kind of ordeals. Like that's what I want to get into, but it's good because it brings me down. Right. The other thing about her is she's willing to tell me when other people around me with the amount of success I have is tell me when my stuff stinks, right? And saying, well, no, you didn't put your best performance out there, or you need to do better, right? Where other people around me will maybe water it down, right? And so that's huge. In regards to employees, right? I think you have to humanize every situation. And there's a book I read years ago. I was difficult when I was in my 20s, in my late 20s, and a mentor of mine asked me to read the book. Oh man, I had it and I just lost it. The Outward Mindset. And it teaches you the ability it basically talks to you about empathy, right? It really shows you like, hey, did you look at it from the perspective of, did I do everything in my power to set these individuals up around me for success? And I want to be aggressive and I want to push and I want to continue to grow, right? But not everybody is Drew and has that ability. And so when we're in different scenarios and things aren't going well or things are going right, I still want to look at it with a 360 perspective and see if I can see it from the point of my employees and what they're facing and what they're doing. And is there any outside factors that we're not taking in consideration, i.e. home life or difficulties that we're not aware of that potentially would be affecting the performance, and try to play all that into it while making decision or helping them work through problems, right? And so I think that book changed my life. It really showed me the ability to stop blaming others and saying, what did I do and what can Drew do in his power to potentially set them up for success in the future so that we can, as a team, be more successful. And I think I've done that. I think I've learned from that. And I think that's a mindset that I've really tried to implement here with our employees and our team as we continue to scale and grow.
I love that. And so, the importance of being able to relate to the human side of each other, I think, helps with being able to give people grace in times that they need it, or also being able to recognize a red flag when you see one as well. But you've had a lot of rapid growth, which means you've picked the right people to stand around you, because it's not easy to achieve that in the amount of time that you have. So with regard to scaling and scaling fast, at that matter, what operational challenges hit first, and how did you navigate those?
I would say to you that you can never have enough great human capital working around you, with you. And with that being said, at first, we didn't necessarily have the ability to just go and hire the top project managers or the top individuals from the top headhunters in the world, right? You had budgets, you got to stay within budgets to make it work. And so when we went out, and when I went out and I started to really try to bring individuals in, what I utilized the intangible skills that people possessed. So when I would interview people for their intangibles and figure out, is there a way that I could then mold that person into the jobs that I'm looking for them to produce or execute here at AmeriTech? And it really worked well for us in the beginning, the first year and a half, 2 years at AmeriTech. I learned that mindset through the military. Being in the military, when you go in and somebody decides that they want to enlist, they enlist for 4 years or 6 years, and they get put into your unit. And as a NCO, as a non-commissioned officer, as somebody in charge in a leadership role, you don't get to go fire them if they don't work out. Like you're stuck with them. They're signed a contract with Uncle Sam, and they're there, right? And so at the end of the day, they're going to show up every day, whether you want them to or not, because they have to, right? And so therefore, you have to figure out, how do you utilize them? And I promise you, nobody wakes up in the morning and says to you, I'm going to be a dirtbag today. Most people wake up and they want to go do good. You just got to figure out, how do you tap that out of them? And so in the military, because I couldn't go fire them, you have to figure out, how do you use the skill sets they possess to the best of your abilities and to the best of the mission of our unit's abilities, and get them out there. And so I became pretty good at, I would always say to my commanders or whoever was in charge when I was growing through the ranks, hey, give me the people that you think are the problem childs, and I want them, right? And I did it for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to prove to everybody that they were incorrect on that individual, and that person was being, misconstrued from the team, and that I could make them work. But 2, I also wanted I always want challenges, and I wanted a challenge to see if I could take that problem person or problem child, or whatever you want to call them, right, and make them into a viable asset to the unit itself. And so I was able to take that same mindset when hiring and saying, I don't have the ability to go buy or hire for the top dollar project managers or personnel out there, but I'm going to go find the best bang for my buck on the ROI that I can, on the money that I can put out there, based off of the intangible skill sets that I know are successful for this position or this role, and mold them into what we need them to be.
I love that. I mean, you're finding good people, you're figuring out what they're good at, and then you're basically teaching them how to do the things that they might not know how to do to meet the other half that they don't know yet, because you didn't need them to come to you already all built, right? Correct. It's like you have them almost like a blank slate. So they're learning it the way that you want them to learn it too. I love that. For sure. I think there are a lot of environments that don't necessarily engage on that respect. And I think construction is probably one of them, right? You expect them to have a skill set, go to work, and, this is my lack of knowledge of what that entails, but you want someone that knows how to hammer the nail in straight every day. And if they don't know how to do that, then it's going to be, you got to teach them how to do it. But in your case, you're saying they have all of these other qualities that are going to be good fit for the culture of the company and the growth of the company. I can teach them how to do that. Yes. If that's the only part that they're lacking. I love that. And I think that a lot of people probably, that resonates with them. And that's how you keep people long term, because not only did they see that you believed in them, but they believe in themselves. So they're doing it happily too, which is a win-win on both sides. I think that's fantastic. And it speaks a lot of what the obvious culture is, which is why when I spoke to your, the colleagues and employees of yours that were helping me prepare for this conversation, really I can see that now even more, that you said they've had that experience with you too, which I think is really awesome. And probably is, part of the success that you've had too, is just your ability to really invest in people like that. And, there's a lot of construction businesses out there right now. And a lot of them want to get into the federal marketplace because it is so evergreen with all the opportunities. So for those contractors that are listening right now that are looking to grow in federal construction, what's going to be the differentiator between the companies that plateau and the companies that actually break through and get to that next stage of growth?
I would say it's two things, and they're kind of similar. When you're in your infancy trying to break in through the government sector, right, you have to go and you have to develop these relationships, and there's going to be a lot of things that maybe some of the larger companies don't want to do. And those items are the low-hanging fruits. You got to say yes, right? And then you have to kill them with customer service, because it's going to resonate with the buyers, the cores, right? The contracting representatives, the contracting officers on the other side that are receiving that service. And they're going to, it's definitely not going to be a large enough potential project to get you a CPARS, right? But you can go and ask for a letter of recommendation, a PPQ, right? Taking those elements and then figuring out, okay, how do I use that to springboard into that next opportunity? When I came over to AmeriTech, the first couple of months, I just bid based off of what opportunities were out on SAM.gov, right? To ink those initial deals and sales and opportunities. But I knew that I needed somebody out there promoting AmeriTech and what our capabilities were, and just kind of get the name out there so it became more of a household name in a specific territory. And so I brought in Dan Riley. He's our executive vice president 3 or 4 months after I came over to AmeriTech. And for the first 5-6 months, all he did in Division 1, which is the New England states, drove to all the 11 VAs continuously every week, different patterns, and just dropped off information about AmeriTech. And eventually, Togus, Maine called us up and said, hey, we got a small opportunity. We can potentially sole source you or do a credit card purchase or whatever they did. I don't remember exactly, right? And it wasn't the sexiest of the jobs, but we said yes, and we did it to the best of our abilities with strong customer service. And guess what? It led to the next opportunity, much more money than what we initially received the first one on. And then that continued to lead, right? We eventually landed a BPA that was worth $1 million. We grew that they were able to continue to increase the ceiling on that. We were the sole provider of that BPA. It went from 1 million to they maxed it out to 7.5 million. And in 2 years, we went through that, and it serviced the whole entire New England region itself. And so, again, that would have never been able to happen if we didn't have somebody just going out there constantly promoting the name. But we said yes to the things that were unattractive to probably some of the larger guys. We said yes to them. We did the best we could with the greatest customer service, and this continued to be our mantra as we continue to grow.
I mean, I think that's hugely impactful, especially businesses that are looking for, their first win to be a prime, their first win to be something ginormous that's going to, change the trajectory for them financially for the rest of their lives. And that's just not, especially in the federal market, it isn't realistic because it's not scalable, number one, and your ability to execute on it most likely financially is going to be impeded for a multitude of reasons. And so I love that you're saying there's nothing wrong with taking the smaller jobs and killing it at those and making sure that not only are you leaving a good reputation behind by your work product, but that you've treated everyone well there. And, I am a firm believer that, nothing that happens every single day is on accident, that there's a reason for everything. And yes. I'm a believer, right? And so it was funny this morning when I was in my car this morning getting ready to go into a meeting, and I was reading some things. And I grew up in a household where, athletics was a very important part of our life. My sisters and I all were, played different sports, but a lot of it, and went on and played in college. And my dad's he was an athlete growing up as well, but huge college football fan. He likes all the other sports too, but he loves college football. And so I loved Lou Holtz, right? And he ended up later in life living here in Orlando, where I was from. And so I was listening to one of his speeches that he did a while ago, but it's something that he talked about all the time, about the 3 things that you should do every single day. in order to make a positive impact. And you've talked about all three of those. So I'm like, it wasn't a mistake. I've heard him say this speech before because this isn't a new one. It's something he talked about every single time he delivered a speech. But the three things every day you're supposed to do is wake up and do the right thing. You do your best at whatever it is that you're doing that day. And the third is let people know that you care and treat people with respect. And I think what a great preparation for this call. I had no idea, I had high aspirations for this call, no less, because I heard nothing but wonderful things about you prior to meeting you today. But I think that it ties in so well with everything that you said. You have a multitude of experience in several different areas, and you've been able to bring all of that good and bad to really create a line of success for not only yourself, but people who work with you as well. And so I think it all kind of lined up there. And that's why I love doing this podcast, because when things kind of, present itself in one of those serendipitous ways, it really inspires me of why I love doing this so much. And I really appreciate everything the way that you've laid it out, because I think we could have spent this entire time talking about how successful AmeriTech is, because it is. We could have sat and talked about all of the contracts that you've won and the different type of work that you provide. But I think what you've really been able to bring to light is that, being a good person and doing the right thing and treating people with respect goes a long way. There's a lot of reward, whether it's professionally or personally, on both sides. And I think that you've really shown that you embody that. And even talking about your wife and giving her, respect, in the sense that having that strong partner in your life is really, it sets the course straighter and a little bit easier to navigate when you've got someone that can stand toe to toe with you no matter what's going on. And so I love that. And kudos to her for being able to be your exact opposite.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. And I think I'd love to be able to have you back on, because like I said, construction market, especially in GovCon, is so huge. I think there's probably a lot of opportunities that you guys have coming up in your own pipeline that you might be able to, through that experience, shed some light and, actual, business practices within that. But, with this conversation being based on, your journey and really sharing the road that you traveled and how you did it and how you've made it to the point where you are today, I think we're good here. I don't want to get too ingrained in something industry specific, because I love everything that you said. So
Okay.
With that being said, I hope you'll come back.
I definitely
and join
will be
us
back,
again.
for sure.
Awesome. And I know you've got a podcast that you're going to be launching here in the next year or so, and we'd love to have you come back on and talk about that once you get that underway. But it's really been a privilege, and I'm proud to have had you on the show today. So thanks for sharing your story with us.
Privilege has been all mine, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Of course. And we thank all the rest of you for joining us as well. As always, we pride ourselves on sharing the most insightful and exciting people and information to help you better navigate your GovCon journey. If you like what you heard today, you can see all of our past podcasts, which are archived on our Parabolas YouTube channel. Stay tuned for all of our future guests in the coming months as we help you grow to great heights in the year ahead. I'm Teresa Moon, and this is Spilling the Tea on GovCon. Have a great day, my friends.